Thanks, Matt, for joining today.
No problem. Happy to try and help out.
Right, I guess we'll wait maybe about another minute just in case there's any stragglers. All right, I think the number's slowing down a little bit. So, and it's about a minute past the time. So I think we're gonna go ahead and get started. So thank you everybody for being here. And thank you, Matt, for joining us today. This is a session about the abstracts, the ARO abstracts. And we're gonna hear a little bit from Matt Kelly, who is or Dr. Matt Kelly, who is from the ARO Council, and he is also at the NIH and the BCD. And so he's gonna hopefully tell us a little bit about what the ARO Council is looking for in an abstract, and a little bit about how to write a good abstract. And then we'll open up the floor to everybody to ask any questions. So with that, Matt, would you like to take over?
Sure. So thanks, Kathy. I'm happy to come and talk to you guys for a little bit. So in addition to being on council, I'm also the overall ARO program chair. So that means that I actually set up I go through the grid and determine what talks, to some extent. I'll start out by telling you a little bit about how this process goes on for ARO, which is, I don't think that different from other places, but just for some background. So I end up determining to some extent, what sessions are when, and handling sort of the overall program for ARO. The way that it works, so the way it works for us is that, as you know, abstract submission will open, or has opened now, will be open through the end of the month. And so on October 1st or 2nd, we have the program committee gets this huge bolus of abstracts that have been submitted. The program committee is made up of, Allie probably knows the exact number, it's probably about 15 members of ARO who are each considered subject matter experts. And so they each have an area of research, or a couple of areas of research, that they are considered to be experts in. And that means that they know the field, they know what the important questions are, what research is going on. And they work with Steve Lomber, who is the ARO scientific program chair. So Steve basically works with that group to go through the abstracts and decide what's going to be presented when. And then, so that's the first step. So all the abstracts come in. Everybody, when you submit an abstract, you're asked to select usually 2 topical areas. And there's a list that Julie sent me that Allie could probably pull up if you want to see it, of the different topic areas. And it's largely static, although we're starting to add a few more. So like this year, we added gene therapy because there's been a huge increase in the number of abstracts that were related to gene therapy, and we didn't really have a topic for that. So based on those, on the topic areas that people select when they put in their abstracts, the abstracts are then divvied out to the people who are the subject expert for that particular topic area. And the first thing that happens is those folks go through, members of the program committee, go through the abstracts, looking at more than just that choice of the topic area, but the title and the actually read the abstract, and they make sure that they're actually in the right session. So sometimes people have misidentified them, or somebody feels like that abstract is better suited for a different topic area. Maybe the secondary topic area is actually a better one. And at the end of that, all the abstracts are distributed to the various subject matter experts. And then those subject matter experts are charged with going through the abstracts and looking at first off, the person's preference, right? So some people, you'll be asked whether you want a poster or a podium. And some people just absolutely do not want a podium. They don't want to get up and talk in front of people. And so they only want a poster. But most people, I hope, will put both, that they're happy to do either a podium or a poster. And for those of you who are here, I will urge you to always try and get a podium. It's a great way to practice presenting in front of people. It's a fantastic opportunity to sort of hone your public speaking. So absolutely say you'll be willing to do a podium, even though I guess some polls have suggested that some people consider public speaking more scary than death. Go ahead and take the plunge and volunteer to give a podium. So what happens then is that each of the subject matter experts will look over their abstracts and they will try to identify what they think are the most exciting, most broadly appealing abstracts within their pile. And they'll go with that and go ahead and try to put together a podium session, which is 8 talks. For most subject areas, depending on the popularity, there could be between 1 to 2, usually not more than that, podium sessions that are put together for each one of those subject areas. And that person will, as I said, look through the abstracts, try to find the ones that they think fit together best, have the broadest appeal, and they'll use that to create a podium session. They'll then ask all the speakers if they're willing to participate in the podium session, and then that's how we actually create those podium sessions that go on at ARO. It's based on the review from the subject matter experts and their efforts to put together interesting podium sessions for people to attend. Once that's done, the program committee members and Steve and I go through all of those podium sessions, and we also have a slate of about 10 symposia that have been already submitted and selected. And we do our best to create a grid in which there's no overlap in subject areas between the different podium sessions. And this can be challenging to do, right? But we don't want, so for instance, in my field, we wouldn't want to put a developmental biology session and a regeneration session at the same time, because a lot of people would go to the same 2 of those. But we feel pretty good putting, say, a psychoacoustic session with a developmental biology session, because there's hopefully going to be not too much overlap in program interest there between those 2. So we do our best. Every year we get some complaints about the fact that the 2 sessions are going on that someone wanted to attend at the same time. But we do our best to try and create a grid where there's limited overlap between people in terms of that. And all the other sessions, all the other abstracts that aren't selected for those podium sessions go into the poster sessions. And during COVID, the posters were basically up perpetually because they could be. But next year, moving forward to actually being back in person, hopefully in Orlando, the posters will go back to being up for just 24 hours, which is what we do. So we basically have all posters are up for a day, and then we have posters from midday Saturday, midday Sunday, midday Sunday, midday Monday, and so on. We will probably ask people to do electronic versions of their posters as well, because that has been really popular. What we found is, I think for 2 reasons. So this is the idea that you just upload a PDF of your poster, and then we ask every presenter to do a little blurb about their poster, so 3-minute presentation. And that's been really successful for 2 reasons, I think. One, a lot of people like to go over the poster sort of without a whole bunch of background noise, to think about the poster and formulate some questions they might have. And then what we hope they'll do moving forward is go to the live session then in Orlando and actually find the presenter and ask those questions. The other reason I think that the electronic posters are really popular is, being the ARO, we have a number of members who are hearing impaired. And the poster rooms are notoriously terrible for people with any sort of hearing impairment, because there's so much background noise. It's really hard for them to interact with anybody or hear what's going on. So for folks who are hearing impaired, the electronic poster gives them a chance, again, to sort of digest the poster beforehand so that they can then focus their interests when they actually go into the really noisy poster room. So that's how we pick that's how the podium sessions are created, and that's how we do the posters as well. And then from that, we can sort of move on to, so what's involved in formulating a good poster that's gonna, so one nice thing, I guess, one aside, one nice thing about ARO is everybody who submits an abstract is going to get to present their abstract at ARO as either a podium or a poster. We don't reject any abstracts. We look at them all, but we take them all, and they're all then presented in one way of shape, in one form or another. So that's really nice because it's good that everybody gets to present. In terms of what you can do to make your abstract appealing to the subject matter expert who's looking at that, I think this then sort of moves us into what are the basics of writing a good abstract. And I thought about this yesterday and made a few bullet points that I can mention to you here, but I think are sort of key things to writing a good abstract. We'll just start with those. So the first one is know the specific abstracts and specific instructions and guidelines for the society that you're submitting to, in this case, ARO. So ARO has a 450 word limit, and just know that going in, because that's going to give you an idea of how to structure your abstract and how much room you have to work with. Abstracts from anywhere words are always limited, so you want to be clear and concise in your writing, right? But with that said, you want to avoid abbreviations, which people tend to use sometimes as a way to cut down on words, because in some cases the subject expert will not know all the abbreviations that you're using. If you have something really long that's repeated like 5 or 6 times in your abstract, it's okay to abbreviate that as long as you introduce it the first time. And sort of a corollary to that that's even worse and to be avoided is avoid jargon. So this is something you hear when you're giving talks as well. Not everybody works in your lab and knows the same jargon that you do. So avoid that when you're writing abstracts. Avoid passive voice. So be more active in the way you write things. So, we did this or I did this experiment. Again, in terms of saving words, avoid adverbs. So one I see a lot is in writing is the results were highly significant. You don't need that. The results were significant. That's all you have to put. The highly is unnecessary. Another really good thing is to get a second opinion. So whether it's your mentor or somebody else in the lab, prepare your abstract with enough lead time that somebody else can look it over and give you some advice, which goes to my last point, which is don't start writing your abstract on September 30th at 4 p.m. Start it a few days before and just take the time, because a lot of people think, well, it's only 400 words. How long can it be? But the 400 words is actually, or how hard can it be to write this? The 400 words can actually be challenging, right? So it's better to start 3 or 4 days beforehand, go through it a couple of times, ask somebody else or a couple of other people to look at it, just so that you can get it honed down so that you're providing a clear and concise message, and it's written in a form that's going to be appealing to the reviewer, the subject matter reviewer, first off. And second off, even after that, at the meeting, people decide what posters they're going to visit or what talks they're going to go to based on the title. So you want to write a title that's active and concise and specific about what you're going to be talking about. And so I'll give you just one example here in terms of a good and bad title from something we did in my lab a few years ago. So a bad title would be something like the role of FGFR3 in cochlear development. That doesn't really tell the reader what the talk's actually going to be about. But a better title is FGFR3 regulates pillar cell fate in the organ of Corti. So that lets the readers know what gene we're talking about, what it's doing, and what system we're talking about. And so it provides a more informative title and makes them more likely to want to come and see your poster. And for the subject matter experts, it again gives them a title that they can use to understand what's going on in that abstract, and that helps them to increase its interest for them and make it more likely that they're going to pick it for a podium if that's what you want. So that's just a very brief overview of the way things work at ARO, and also just some tips on writing good abstracts. That's all I really had to say, but I'm happy to answer questions if you have some.
Great. Thank you so much. That was really helpful. So I think it would be great to open up the floor to everybody. If you want to unmute and talk, that would be great. If you want to put it in chat, I'd be happy to read it out as well. But since since just so that we're waiting on questions to come, I do have maybe a question or two that I can probably get started with. So it seems like at ARO, the kind of the way how the abstract wants to be written is basically broken down to introduction, methods, results, and conclusion. How hard of a rule is that? Like, is it okay for us to submit an abstract that's just a paragraph of an abstract, or is it a hard requirement for us to submit it like that?
Allie, I'll probably need you to chime in here. My memory is that the abstract actually has different sections, right? Introduction. Yeah.
That's correct. Yes, it does. And the reason it's done that way is for when we pull it from our system, it's already formatted properly for the abstract book that you'll see at the meeting. So that's why you see it that way.
Yeah. So if you write it as one paragraph, when the time comes to submit it, you need to split that up into the different, basically you could write it as one paragraph and just pull the sentences and put them into different subject areas, introduction, methods, results, and conclusions.
I see.
But better to start, again, sort of going back to one of the things I mentioned, better to know the instructions before you start, as you brought up.
Right. Okay. Okay, I'll probably ask one other question. So you did mention about abstracts being submitted that are some of them being chosen for podium, some of them being chosen for a poster. And I just wanted to see if even if your abstract is very well written, for example, if that abstract doesn't necessarily fit in the program that is being designed, would you say that there's still a big chance that that abstract will not be selected for a podium session?
So if your topic area is, I guess that's a hard one to say hard and fast one way or another. If you've written, if your topic area doesn't fit sort of with the topic of your, let me rephrase it, if the subject of your abstract doesn't fit perfectly with the podium, sort of the overall theme of the podium that's trying to be designed by the subject matter expert, that can be challenging. But I think, what we ask the subject matter experts to do is not necessarily to put together a symposium where every abstract is on the same topic, but to put together a symposium that presents the best science. So I would much rather see a podium session that's not completely focused on one topic, but that presents great science over a broader area within one particular topic, so I'd rather see that. So hopefully the subject area experts listen to us about that and go ahead and pick the best science, not necessarily the abstracts that are all totally focused on one particular small area of research.
Great, thank you. I see one question on the chat, or I guess the questions are coming in. So one of the questions that are being asked are there word limits per section within the abstract?
I don't believe so. Allie, is that? Yeah, right. When I did a practice a couple of months ago and did a practice abstract, and there was just an overall word limit.
Okay. And then another question is, what are the details required for the methods section?
There are no specific requirements. What a good methods section lets the readers know what you did. It's an abstract, so you're not going to be able to provide them with specific details here, but you want to have a good, concise 3 to 5 sentence method section that lets the readers know what the specific methods are that you were using. But we certainly don't expect a lot of detail in an abstract that's only 450 words.
Like, for example, if you fixed it, like information like you use 4% fixation, like those information wouldn't be, yeah, okay.
Right. Just say tissue was fixed.
Right, right. Okay, so what's the best way to write conclusions for an ongoing study while researchers working to get more data for the study?
So I think in that case, you want to, if you have conclusions that you believe are, if the data is generally trending towards a particular conclusion, I think it's reasonable to say, at this point, our data strongly indicates that this is the most likely outcome. Everybody understands that it's a poster, and I have certainly been to posters where the abstract said, this is what we think is going on, and at the poster, the person said, data we had the day I wrote the abstract suggested this. It's a few months later now. Turns out that wasn't the case. This is actually the result. And that's completely fine. Nobody's going to fault you for saying, here's what it looks like today, but then at the poster saying, actually, it turned out it was something else. So I think that's the way to do that, is say, here's what we think is going on. We're still in the middle of collecting data, but here's the way we think it looks right now.
Okay, great. I think there are some questions regarding kind of data not being completely resolved, kind of building on the question that I just asked. And one of the other questions that was mentioned was that if the applicant doesn't have enough data at the time of the abstract submission, but expects some results at the time of the conference, how should that be described in the abstract?
Yeah, so, I think we do see abstracts like that. And what a writer needs to do is to frame the question that they're pursuing and maybe spend a little bit more time there in terms of describing the experimental design, right? So here's this question, here's how I think we can address this question. And then in your conclusions, you can say, I would say something along the lines of, I think I've come up with a really good way to answer this challenging question, and the experiments are ongoing, and hopefully we will get results that will help us to resolve the issue by the time of the meeting, or something like that.
Sounds great. I think this might be more of an Allie question. How many posters are usually submitted in general, and what part of it end up in the session?
Yeah, so,
Oh, what?
no, Allie, go ahead. How many abstract submissions have we got in the last few years?
We usually, so COVID took us down a little bit, but typically for your in-person meetings, you see around 1,100 posters. Okay.
And so of those, the number of podium sessions that can be created is largely set in stone, with a little bit of wiggle room. So we have the members of the association have expressed a desire to not have more than 3 concurrent sessions. So we have stuck to that. So we only have 3 concurrent sessions. And so you can do the math, right? There's the presidential symposium on Saturday morning, and then beginning Sunday afternoon, we have 3 concurrent sessions, and we have essentially 3 sessions a day. So we basically, after Saturday, there are 9 possible podium sessions. So 3 from 8 to 10, 3 from 10 to 12, and then 3 from 2 to 4. Of those, what we populate that with are podium sessions and symposia. I'm a strong believer in the fact that I think podium sessions are a great way to get young investigators an opportunity to stand up and showcase their work, whereas I think that symposia tend to be more representative of more established investigators who give great talks but don't need the practice. So I pushed to decrease the number of symposia because that would let us increase the number of podium sessions. That being said, we have the structural limitation. So once all the abstracts have been selected for podium sessions, all the remaining abstracts then go into the poster sessions. And as I said, we basically then break those down such that a quarter are being shown each day for 24 hours. And they're again grouped by topics. So of those 1,100 posters, once you subtract the ones that are in the podium sessions, all the other ones are then broken down and presented 25% a piece across the course of the meeting.
Okay, great. So another question, and I think this kind of relates back to the previous question, is that she said, I think the data can be changed based on some analysis. Do you think it's acceptable to change the statements a little before the presentation from the original abstract? Or do you have to be very cautious about contents before abstract submission?
So I'm a little unclear on the question. There's the question there, is it okay to change sort of the conclusions or the thought process of your abstract between when you write it and the meeting? I think that's the.
I think that's what it, I think Yoshi is the one that asked the question. Would you mind unmuting and asking or clarifying the question?
Yes. Sorry. Yes. I meant the what Matt and Dr. Kelly mentioned. Just there. So yeah, sometimes their conclusions or statements or so things can be changed based on their analysis just before their presentation or yeah. So it can be acceptable or if it's published somewhere as a some way, probably we have to be very cautious about the contents of the abstract. So that's what I meant.
Gotcha. Okay, so our abstracts are not published, so that's one thing to not worry about. And that certainly, I think, should make people a little more relaxed about that. I mean, there's an understanding in the field that when you write an abstract, again, you can write an abstract based on the data that you have, but we really want people to, we don't want everybody to just show up and present published data, because that we can see already, right? We want to encourage people to show the data that's ongoing, show their work that's ongoing. And so that comes along with an understanding that sometimes the data and the conclusions are going to change from when you write the abstract to when you get to the meeting. And you absolutely you always want to let the data dictate where you go, right? So don't, this is one of these situations that you see sometimes with more senior people who will come up with a great hypothesis about how they think something is going. And over the course of multiple publications, they'll generate data that basically disproves their own hypothesis, but they'll refuse to accept that their hypothesis was wrong. And they just sort of you see them sort of sometimes trying to shoehorn their data into fitting with their hypothesis. And that's just the wrong way to do it, right? The data should always drive your scientific thinking. And if the data says your hypothesis, while it seemed great, is actually not right, then that's the way you need to go. And that needs to be true for your abstract. We wrote the abstract, this seemed like the way things were going. Now it turns out it's different. The thing to do is stand up, even at your podium, stand up and say, I wrote this in the abstract. The data looked like this the day I wrote this. Turns out it's wrong. Here's the way it actually is. That's much better and will be far more accepted by the audience than to stand up there and say, here's how I think it's the hypothesis I had when I wrote my abstract still might sort of be right. Because people in the audience are going to go, I don't think that's right. So it's much better to just come clean, say, this is what we thought was going on. Turns out it's this. So yeah, so with abstracts, everybody should totally understand that you can't know what you don't know. And when you write the abstract, it might look one way. If it turns out that's wrong, definitely just change your abstract. I've seen people, this I don't support, but I've seen people basically change the title of their abstract. So you go to their poster and there's a different title on the poster because the conclusion changed, and so they changed their title. That you shouldn't do, but I have seen people do that in the past.
Thank you so much.
Great. Do we have any additional questions from the audience? Okay, well, I guess I have a little bit more of a technical question then. So the abstract is due September 30th. When will we hear back from ARO of like when we're going to be, or what kind of presentations we're going to be doing and when it's accepted?
We try to do that fairly quickly. Allie, is there a schedule yet for what the deadline is that we're shooting for?
We try to do it as soon as possible and ideally no later than the end of October, early November, before the holiday season begins.
There's typically 2 rounds, as we said. So the first thing we ask all the members of the committee to do is to look at the pile of abstracts that they've been given and make sure that they're all appropriate for them. And that, there's a deadline for that, usually a week or so after the deadline, after the submission deadline. And then after any resorting happens, then they have another few weeks to go through their abstracts and try to put together podium and poster sessions before, as Ali said, before the end of October, sort of early November, when we want to have that finalized before the holidays, when it gets really hard for people to find time for this sort of thing.
Has there been a reduced number of abstracts that was submitted for this ARO because of COVID? Just out of curiosity.
Ali, you have the numbers in front of you, right? So
Not particularly, no. We're kind of back up to our normal symposia amount.
That's great.
So no.
yeah, so they were down. So 2 years ago, when we knew we were going to be virtual, I think things were down in terms of submissions. Last year, we were planning on being in person until fairly close to the end. And I think we saw good submissions from that. And this year, I would guess we'll be at sort of back to where we were, if not higher. I think people are sort of really looking forward to going to in-person meetings again. So I would expect that we'll have a really good year.
Absolutely. So we have another question. What does abstract reviewers look for to assign someone for podium presentation in case the presenter opt for both poster and podium during abstract submission, particularly when presenters did not make podium presentations before or didn't make podium presentations before?
Yeah, so, I can't speak for the specific thought processes of every member of the program committee. I think that some of the things we've talked about are definitely key, a well-written abstract so there are a couple of things here. One that we asked them to think about, first and foremost is always the science, right? So what looks like the most exciting science that's out there? But a well-written abstract is sort of going to be a clue to the reviewer that this is somebody who can give a good talk, right? We don't want, one thing that we get a lot of complaints about is if we have podium speakers who don't give good talks. They're not particularly great public speakers, and they therefore do not a great job of presenting their data. So a well-written abstract will make the reviewer be inclined to think this is a person that communicates well and will be able to give a good presentation. So a good, clear, concise abstract that very nicely conveys the question that you're asking, the methods that you're using, the results that you're getting, is the best advice I can give you for trying to make your abstract one of the more appealing ones for the reviewer. And I can tell you that we have had cases where someone has said they only want a poster, but their science looks so good and their abstract is so well written that we have gone back to that person and said, will you do a podium? Because we think your research has such broad appeal and you'll just do such a nice job. So we do on occasion find people who we have to go and ask to do podiums because their abstract looks so good and we really want their research to be out there. And that's not to say that, right, so there tends to be this sort of pervasive thought process, and I'm guilty of this as well, that somehow podiums are the way to go and posters are therefore somehow second-class methods of presentation. That's absolutely not true. I think podiums are a great opportunity to work on public speaking, but posters really are where you can spend time interacting with the attendees. They can ask lots of questions. There's 3 minutes after a podium is really not enough time to do much of anything. So you can really have an in-depth conversation with experts in the field and get really good ideas for where to go next with your project, network in terms of what you're going to do next with your career. Those things happen in the poster room. Podiums are good for working on public speaking, but posters have a huge number of advantages as well. So really both of these are great ways to present your data.
Great, thank you. So there's one question that I have that doesn't exactly pertain to the abstract writing, but so there's actually some concerns. For example, your data is not exactly ready to be published. In fact, it might be like about a year away from publication, and actually having to present that at a big meeting like ARO might like you might actually feel pretty uncomfortable to present this in a podium presentation because you get more broader audience than a poster presentation, which typically, if we don't think about what happened during COVID, which was put up for a longer period of time, typically posters are only put up for 24 hours. And so I guess people feel a little bit more comfortable putting up their posters for 24 hours and then putting them down, especially if their data is not exactly ready for publication. And so I just wanted to see what your thoughts are on if your science is not exactly ready to be public or close to being published, would you still advise that person to go for a podium or would it be better for a poster? Or I don't think there's a clear answer to this, but I just wanted to see what your opinions are.
So for ARO, I think if your project is still pretty limited in terms of data, I would suggest that is probably more appropriate for a poster, because the podiums do tend to get a bigger audience of people who really, as I said, they're going there for the most sort of exciting, up-to-date science that they think is going to be presented. And so I think that in that circumstance, a podium might be a podium presentation with very limited data might be not particularly well received, and that would be more appropriate for a poster situation. Where again, if you're in the early stages of a project, you really want that. You could really benefit from the interaction of talking to other people. You might say, have you thought about trying this? Or what about this different approach to doing it? So that's probably better suited for a poster situation. And I guess I was going to mention one other thing here, which comes up sometimes, and that is the concern about, because I thought you might be asking about this. The other thing we sometimes have concerns with is that you're presenting data, someone's presenting unpublished data, and is there a chance that you're going to be scooped by somebody else by presenting that data at a meeting? And I mean, I guess I would love to tell you I can tell you that my lab is generally not worried about that. We present data we present unpublished data. And I would love to tell you that has never resulted in us getting scooped, but that would be a lie. It did in fact happen once. Although the other lab was well ahead of us anyway. So all it did was sort of prompt them to move faster when we presented some unpublished data. But overall, I think that the chances of that are very low, right? The chances of somebody else being in a position to turn around and essentially create a project that you've been working on are very limited. ARO as a society has everyone acknowledged. We have an ethics statement that we have everyone acknowledge and accept when they're submitting an abstract and attending the meeting, that they will in fact not do that type of thing. But one difference between us, and so this is something you may see, one difference between us and a lot of other meetings is that we do allow, a lot of other meetings basically don't allow any reproduction of presentations, either poster or podiums. So you're not allowed at a lot of meetings to take pictures of what's going on. We do allow people to either make recordings of podium presentations or take pictures of posters. And that's because we're an association that deals with communication disorders. And so we acknowledge that a lot of our attendees may not be able to follow a verbal presentation in real time. And they may need, in order to fully understand that presentation, they may need to go back and listen to it a couple of more times. And so we do allow recordings of things so that people can do that, or to have them make there's a little bit of a gray zone there with posters, right? Because a person with a communication disorder should still be able to read a poster, but we allow that as well. Any of you who have gone to ARO in the old days, if you go back to the poster room at 11 o'clock at night, there are always people there taking pictures of the posters. So even long before there were all these digital concerns, people were still taking pictures of posters. And I don't believe we have a rampant problem with anybody being scooped. So I think that most of our members are ethical in their behavior and they behave accordingly.
Sounds great. Okay, does anybody else have any questions? Please feel
Hi,
free to
Dr. Kelly.
unmute.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Oh, George,
I
yes.
had a question about the podium sessions where are there issues where one of the content experts on the program committee is proposing too many or too few podium sessions based on the number of abstracts they've received in their pile?
Yeah, that happens occasionally. Somebody will say they want to make too many podium sessions. Really that then comes down to Steve just saying, well, look, we're looking at here are the number of total abstracts that came in your topic area relative to everything else, and it just doesn't warrant this many podium sessions for just in the interest of fairness for your topic area. So people, sometimes we occasionally end up with these weird sort of potpourri sessions if we've got, if we have a few subject area experts who have just a handful of abstracts they really think should be in podium sessions. And so we'll end up making up a podium session that's not super coherent in terms of the topic areas, but again, hopefully really represents good science. And so we'll have some potpourri sessions like that, but we try to stay away from that and have them be more topic focused.
Great, thank you.
Sure.
All right, anybody else? Okay, that seems like the end of the questions then. Right? Okay. Well, in that case, I just want to very much thank Dr. Kelly for being here and really giving us amazing information. It's all very, very helpful. And thank you so much for Ali for like giving all those information as well. It's these are all very helpful information for everybody to prepare. We do have our abstract submission coming up September 30th. And I want to say good luck to everybody for your submission and hope to see all of you at ARO. And we do have another coffee hour coming up in September and hope that you all look out for that email as well. So thank you, everybody.
Okay, yeah, and I hope to see you all at the ARO meeting.
Okay, thank you. Bye. Have a great rest of your day.